Welcome to TradeTheMBI.com. This is John. This report is for the 1st of April, often known as April's Fool's Day, but there's no fooling about what the market's doing here as we're now over 39.80, which kind of really pushes things towards that 4K number that we've been talking about for so long. It'll be interesting when we actually get up to that point. As we're looking at it right here from our MBI indicator, and what you can see is I've removed the cyan and green lines going to the core lines here. And what we look at in this particular case is once that red got back above the green and blue, and then the blue, of course, with that up pivot where we're in a continuation, and of course, that buy crossover of the orange, which is just the magenta line. If you're using it, the magenta will probably be a little more extreme. I like the smooth nature of this orange, but I will convert it into the magenta shortly once all the configurations have been established. It's interesting because we're getting a slight divergence between what we see from the DOC reading, where we've got shorts increasing within this rise into the highs, as well as short-term buyers fading off here with the steel crossing below. So a little bit of mix, but with that rising gold that we see in the shakeout, we kind of expect the 100% mark, and that's kind of where we're at. As it flattens out, though, that's where it becomes interesting. We're still seeing rising shakeout, so we're up +2. Anytime we get above that zero, we're always in a bullish configuration. So we're pressing right down even to new highs. So that's consistent with what we would expect. And once we get over the 50% here as well on the NQ, definitely pushes forward. So that's also consistent. Gold, having retraced its low, finds itself in a super oversold at that -20 level on the DOC, which usually creates a bit of a pop. And now you've got midterm buyers coming in, and the short-term buyers cross back above. Not a whole lot of room for them, because once they get to the peak, if you don't see a major investment here from DOC red moving over to 13, not likely to do a whole lot. And of course the euro still in its weakness, and of course now they're talking about another month long of red zone lockdowns here in Italy, which is just so divergent to what else is happening in the world as far as things go. What we're looking at here with these little dots and everything, these are some of the configurations that I look for to set up some of the constructs for turnaround buys, that kind of setup. And you can compare it to the original Dealcon paint, which basically had just the single blue buy over here that then faded off. And where we see the stops within it set up, the magenta candles will pop in place, which is an interesting feature. It fills in some of the gap areas that we were using the GAM function for. But I just started to configure some of these setups, but haven't really incorporated a lot of the extremes and some of the other things that go into it. But here we had cyan under red, which turned into the buy configuration. Of course, this is coming off of a P2 pivot, which actually should turn on. So those are visible. I like seeing the P2s and P3s simply because it lets us know when we're in a rising momentum, and that occurred literally right about here at the 68 range. And you can see we're pushing towards that high range. You have that white under level 10, which usually creates these pretty consistent runs, particularly when you have that red over the blue. It's when it switches is when you tend to get it. We had this short signal that took place in here, and it just went on and on and on and on, and then finally broke down in the middle of the day. But it was coming off of pretty strong power readings from early on. And one that you'll see here that you'll note is this little violet candle here. And what that really is referring to is typically when we see these pivots of the blue-green line, where we then have the red popping back above, really tend to give the buy configuration setups. And so you can see where they're identified in the white, and then the magenta just recognizes a lot of the other ones, and that pretty much captures right at the bottom of the move setup there, and carries through. So once those colorings are taken into effect, well, pretty accurate read. And a lot of it's also going to involve the various zones of DOC red. And we know when we're below negative 13 popping up, you're going to want to incorporate tighter stops. And also, too, particularly when red DOC is below 0. It makes significant when we have the cyan crossovers. So a lot of those little details that need to get added into the setups, but overall it gives us some really clean readings going forward, and certainly will allow for some really nice trend moves, which I think are very exciting. So it's just a matter of finalizing some of the details on that. That's why you also have the Diocon P2, the original one, along with the indicators that were sent out. So it really makes for some clean and easy reads, I think, utilizing this configuration without having a lot of the gyrations that you would typically get from the green and cyan of the regular MDI. So as those get factored in, both I'll give you the understanding of the readings, but in general, it would just be nice because the color changes will take place. That will make it fairly simple to follow, and we'll certainly be going over a lot of those in the Skype chat as well. But just thought I'd give you an idea of how that's all progressing. And another one I like to see is when I get a series of the signals that come through. Makes it easy for an evaluation to go forward. But even like in a setup like this where you would see a configuration, when I've got extremes already getting near positive after 2 bars, you know that's not going to make much of a move. So at that particular point when you're looking for pivot, it becomes pretty clear where things are. The difficulty on some of these when we get into the tiny action is, you're only talking about a few points between where it is from a signal to peak. And so in the PNT2 regular one, it just maintained after the failure of the blue candle that took place here. It's white, but that just maintained red trend until it flipped across. I'm going to show what that one is so you can see the comparison. So if we turn to just the regular Diocon paint, captured the short as well, and put in the blue setup, which was the oversold, and that just really couldn't catch any momentum, and then it went into the soft, and again here you have the same buy setup configuration with the cyan and the red, always buy in that particular case. So pretty clean. I think that the market's slowed down just a little bit there towards the month end. I think we'll probably see a bit more activity again here at the start of the month, particularly by the beginning of next week when new money will have come in from institutional funds, that kind of setup. So we'll be looking at that as well. As always, though, trade well, and we'll be getting into that short holiday trade with Good Friday. So something to bear in mind. As always, though, trade well.